there was an article in the newspapers yesterday. I just love the Mail because it's so optimistic and helpful in its
Yeah.
writing.
It's good list.
So it's like it's also people who want to be seen to be healthy, or sometimes like
Mm,
or look well. People who want to look well may end up making themselves unhealthier, and and then it goes in. So people are trying to be healthy. So the headline for me was saying about looking healthy.
mm,
Then it was like people are trying to be healthy, and then it went back to looking healthy, and it was all about the social pressure
mm.
of looking healthy.
How negative a spin can you put on it? It's,
And like,
mm,
and this is what we've got now is that we've got this so the whole anti-fat shaming stuff. And I'm not saying we should be doing fat shaming. I mean, I've
mm,
had more fights with my mum about her abuse of fat people in
mm,
the way she talks about it because she spent a lifetime not being fat after having
mm,
been fat when she was younger.
mm,
She's made it public enemy number one.
mm,
And she's like, I'm trying to explain to her, a lot of these people just don't understand why they're where they're at. And you can't just say they're greedy because we know that
mm,
the food, the environment, everything can just absolutely bugger their appetite regulation.
mm.
And if you got some your body telling you that you're hungry, you're gonna eat, aren't you? You
Mm.
just
Yeah, we should be just celebrating everybody's efforts, even if they've gone vegan and it's not working that great for them. At least they're trying. At least they're in the game doing something.
hmm
Yeah, yeah, that Daily Mail thing's basically the implication there seems to be don't try and accept that we're all deteriorating.
yeah, yeah. And there is a lot of that. There's a lot of people coming out, and that's maybe, and I get that's feelings. And presumably that's feelings we have to take account of as well, though, because that's you can we can end up making people feel bad
Mm,
because they're not healthy or that they're a lesser
mm,
person because they're
yeah,
not healthy and stuff like that. And that's where I think it's trying to present the arguments and find the emotive reasons for why we want to be healthy.
mhm,
So we're not telling somebody we should. Wouldn't you want to be wouldn't you want the best for your children? All this type of stuff. And I don't know. I mean, it's probably you're always gonna get somebody who's like gonna feel offended by it or
mm.
yeah. I mean, even my relatives in India, they just oh, you you're very what was it? You're very health conscious.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, I've had fucking cancer. Of course, I'm
Mm.
pretty health conscious. It's like,
Yeah, yeah,
and it's like, and I get it. This is the thing for you. Yeah, we're not creatures designed to look after our own health in that sense.
yeah.
You just have to think about it consciously.
Yeah, I have similar things when I'm more around the Pakistani side of my family. Um, that yeah, it's something that's observed upon. They'll use the phrase careful. Oh, you're very careful. You're very careful with what you eat. Um, and I take it, that it's a little alien to them, and they're not criticizing. It's just an observation.
Hmm.
And they'll still try and encourage. Oh, have a samosa. Have this. Have that.
Yeah.
You say no 5 times, thank you, and they'll still come back and say, have this. Have something else. Um, yeah. So I think it's the what's interesting is the probably to them the idea that somebody is so focused on being healthy, whereas I don't think that they feel that they have that much agency over whether they're well or not. Um, I think in their minds, illness is something that just happens to people who are
Hmm.
unlucky.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really how I see it.
And I think as well, I've noticed this more recently, the kebab places and stuff have been because it's a good place to go and get the meat, but
Mm,
they don't seem to be able to handle the concept that I don't want the pita bread or the
mm,
rice or whatever. And I think that sort of cultural belief system because that's what they've grown up with, and it's like,
Mm,
and so we do. I think that's something we probably have to be aware of is that we're challenging pretty much every belief known to man at the moment, and I mean, people still
mm,
going, restricting food groups and things like that, and I guess people don't see it like we do. That well, for me, we talk about three food groups:
mm,
carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. But I almost started thinking of it, given this sort of, and I have to say, it's newfound information for me over the last few months. This idea that actually pretty much every creature on the planet gets its energy, its food, and its nutrition from protein and fats,
mm,
and carbohydrates is really a human invention
mm,
in terms of pure ingestion of carbohydrates into the bloodstream as opposed to plant fibers,
mm,
stuff like that. Obviously there's the fruit issue, but even, if you go back to fruits, again, our fruits were fruits this sweet or whatever, but we talk about carbohydrates as a food group, but it's a food group we've invented.
mhm,
Starches, complex starchy carbs. It wasn't available in our evolution.
mm,
So there's that side of things, but obviously that's where humans are at, and that's where what we believe. And so it is a very difficult
mm,
conversation to have for the majority of people. So we're going to get a whole load of flack.
mm. Yeah, the other side of my family who are all very health conscious, they all still think I'm mad. Um, they can't get their heads around this idea of not eating carbohydrates. It's just so alien to them. That a third to two-thirds of your plate has to be carbohydrates, or it's not a meal. Even though at least half of them, I think, have got a gluten intolerance at this stage. There's just swapping their gluten grains for some other kind of grain. But that's a process. I went through that as well. I
Yeah,
did for a long time. Gradually weaned myself off. It wasn't an overnight thing. Um, and as you said, I think culturally it's such a massive uh, part of our culture, isn't it? Food, and often there's a staple that's at the center, a
mm,
carbohydrate staple that's at the center of each culture. So bread's a big thing in some cultures.
yes,
Rice
yeah,
is a big thing in some cultures.
yeah,
Um, a million ways to make different variations of rice and loads of subtle different variations of bread. And then, let's be honest, they do taste great.
yeah. Well, yeah, potatoes is
Mm,
another one. I used to have a
yeah,
cookbook, 100 different ways to cook a potato.
yeah.
And it was all the fried ones that I loved.
Mm, mhm,
Um, yeah, and so I mean, part of me does come back and questions myself. Well, am I doing the right thing? Should I be able to enjoy these things and
mm,
stuff like that? And that's one thing you hear. I did like Elizabeth Bright's on this interview, but she would say, she was visiting friends in Glasgow,
mm,
or family in Glasgow, and it was all, she'd have a scone and the jam and the butter
mm,
and things like that. So she would, and I
mm,
like the idea of, you've got a capacity, that you're going to be back in the state, the physiological state. She talked about
mm,
being back in ketosis within 4 to 8 hours,
mm,
because she just knows, well, that's where my
mm,
instinct is about, and so I can, but I'm going to do that maybe once every couple of weeks
mm.
at tops, not every day.
Yeah. I don't think plants are inherently bad. I think
Just
it's just the way that we consume them, uh, typically. And I definitely want to get back to a point, and I think I pretty much can at this point, where I can throw some fruit and some sweet potato in or something like that, or some rice, and it's not a problem. Um, I just think when it's a habitual thing, it's less than ideal, certainly for me. Um, but yeah, being at a point where you can have some of those foods and it's not a big deal, I think it's the way to go.
Yeah, I think if you look at the way humans go to, we clearly are omnivores in terms
Mm,
of that we are capable of eating all these different types of food. Would we choose to eat the way we would if certain things. If we had free availability of everything, what would we have carried on eating? There is part of me that sort of thinks, well, actually, the whole meat thing, if you look back at the history of it and what a number of anthropologists are saying, that we basically hunted a lot of animals to extinction.
Mm.
And in that sense, you sort of think, well, we already started the destruction back then. We didn't have the foresight to actually sort of procure our food source for long, and the whole idea of sustainability. So I sort of use these things about the brain being bigger and all of this sort of stuff as a good thing. But then I think, well, actually, through all of that time, we basically destroyed every large mammal.
Mm.
We destroyed 47% of the large mammal species,
Hmm.
according to Sapiens or whatever. And it was like,
There are other theories on that, though.
yeah, I know.
Um,
Um, and I think if you look at I I think the interesting thing is as well is that when I'd like to go and study anthropology. I'd like
mm,
to try and find out more. I've never been a great historian.
mhm,
I didn't really get on with history at school
mm,
because it was just dates and kings and queens and stuff like that.
mm,
But there are certain things now, like anthropology to me seems like history.
mm. Yeah,
Um, but I'd really like to understand where we're coming from, and
yeah.
be able to, what you were saying about being able to talk with authority
Mm,
on stuff. And I'd like to think, yeah, okay, well, yeah, I've been through all of this stuff, and yeah, the balance of the evidence suggests this and whatever. Um, but I think the agricultural thing that was probably a big thing that we moved there. But was that because we'd already got rid of the big animals? But that's what's allowed us to bloom
mm,
in numbers. Whilst we lived on animals,
mm.
that didn't seem to happen because there was never this idea of a surplus.
Well, here's something interesting on that point. So again, been listening to a lot of Mary Ruddick's ideas of or experiences from her traveling around Africa
Mhm.
and spending time with different tribes. So the Hadza and various other hunter-gatherers come up. And then there's the Maasai. So the Maasai are not hunter-gatherers, are they? They're
Mhm.
um,
Farmers, essentially.
yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know if you class them as part of farmers, but pastoralists. I think is they keep animals.
Mhm.
They could probably move their animals around, grazing them in different places.
Yeah, okay.
Um, so it's sort of it's a step in between because animal food's still their main.
Yeah, and when I
Yes.
say like when I think of like when I say farmer, I was
Mm.
meaning a meat farmer.
Right. Okay. Yeah. But interestingly, they seem to be regarded as almost not the official rulers, but the sort of most dominant group in that area.
Okay.
Uh, They're kind of regarded as having a sort of nobility or regal air about them.
Hmm.
Whilst it seems like the others don't worry about tomorrow, they assume that they're going to be able to hunt and get food tomorrow. They hardly ever store food. Just the idea of storing food in a herd for the Maasai has allowed them to
Hmm.
kind of progress and dominate to some extent. And
Mm.
also, they're much, much bigger. A lot of the
Yeah.
hunter-gatherers are actually quite small in stature.
Yes.
The Maasai are known for being, big, strong, in great health. I think that the hunter-gatherers are known to be in good health as well, but it's just interesting the difference in stature as well. Um,
Well, thinking of what people have said about the Cheyenne Indians or the
mm,
American Plains Indians, that they were taller and bigger when
mm,
there's plentiful access.
mm,
So if they know that they can find they got essentially got their own herds, they're not having to
mm,
look after them because there were sort of thousands and thousands of bison
mm,
on the plains and stuff. Um, yeah, and we see that, don't we? Because in America, it's a big thing. It's like that tall people are better regarded, they're better paid,
mm,
they reach higher positions in their careers.
mm,
Yeah, yeah, president being one of them. It's
mm,
like that whole thing is like height is
mm.
a big thing in terms of how we perceive other people.
Hmm.
Generally they're going to be better warriors.
Mm.
Generally, not in every situation. Not if you're fighting the Vietnamese in their tunnels, but
Yeah. Well, Tim Noakes was saying that actually being smaller from an endurance point of view is an advantage. So if you're
yeah.
part of a hunting tribe, being smaller
Mm,
could be better. Um, Whereas if you're herding animals, it's not so much of an issue. It's not so much of an imperative to have that huge endurance capacity.
hmm Yeah, it makes sense, doesn't it? And because you're not having to support as much muscle mass. This is the thing that just sort of not irks me, but just niggles away at this idea of being muscular.
Mm.
There's a balance to it, isn't there?
Yeah, yeah.
And
No,
exactly what
more's
you're,
better. If you look around at the moment, more's better.
yeah. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking, I look at Sean Baker, for instance,
Mm.
and I love what he's done, and what he is doing and stuff. But I think, you know, actually, nature's not like that.
Mm.
It's a bit of sport. Although I guess there's always a few. You got your elephants, your rhinos, and stuff like
Yeah.
that. You have got your big creatures, but everything in our makeup seems to be about conserving energy.
Mm.
And so actually having all of that extra muscle bulk is not
Mm.
very energy conserving,
No,
potentially. Yeah, you need more fuel for it
I
to
think you need one or two in your tribe for
hmm
intimidation factor. So, you've got a couple of really big warriors in there.
Yeah,
They're probably going to get looked after by the small, skinny guys who actually do all the hunting and gathering.
yeah. But it's almost like, I guess, a little bit like it sounds a bit like the lions. You have this big muscular male with his big mane, but it's actually the females that go and do the hunting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Maybe Sean Baker's like the Chiefs um,
Yeah.
main guard or something like that. But then the little guys like us are actually the ones scurrying around and bringing the food back.
Well, it'd be interesting to see what actually goes on in in terms of the gorillas, because
Mm,
obviously big male silverback, he's a silverback in terms of that stature, isn't he?
mm,
And how much of the actual doing stuff the silverbacks do.
mm.
I mean, obviously I mean, he's there for, like, if someone comes to threaten the troop, then
Yeah.
he's there. Come on,
Mm, mhm.
yeah. Um, but like you say, they'll be the doers.